Waking up, the brave rancher found his unexpected reward, a stunning Apache wife. The rancher's day always began before the sun rose. The land around him was quiet at that hour, stretched wide and empty, as if the world itself was still asleep. He lived alone on his small ranch near the edge of the frontier, where the land was rough and life demanded strength every single day. There were no easy mornings here. Every sunrise meant work, and every sunset meant survival. He was known among the nearby settlers as a brave man, though he never called himself that. To him, bravery was simply doing what had to be done. He repaired broken fences, cared for his animals, and guarded his land from dangers that could appear at any moment. Wild animals, harsh weather, and the constant fear of conflict were part of daily life. Still, he stayed. This land was all he had, and he believed that leaving would mean giving up on himself. His house was small and simple, built from wood he had cut with his own hands. Inside there was little comfort: a hard bed, a table, a chair, and a stove that warmed the room only when the fire was strong. Yet he did not complain. Comfort was a luxury few could afford on the frontier. What mattered was that the walls stood firm and the roof did not leak. Loneliness followed him like a shadow. Days would pass without him speaking to another person. Sometimes, when the wind moved across the plains, he felt as though the land itself was whispering, reminding him that he was alone. At night, after a long day of work, he would sit quietly and think about how different life might have been if he had chosen another path. But those thoughts never lasted long. The next morning always demanded his attention. The land around the ranch was beautiful in a hard, unforgiving way. Tall grass waved under the open sky, and distant mountains stood like silent guards. It was a place that rewarded patience and punished weakness. The rancher respected the land deeply. He understood its moods and learned to read its signs. Dark clouds meant storms, still air meant heat, and sudden silence often meant danger. Stories traveled fast in frontier towns, and many of them carried fear. People spoke about nearby Apache lands with uneasy voices. Some warned of danger, others spoke of conflict from the past. The rancher listened, but never allowed fear to shape his heart. He believed that judging people without knowing them only brought more trouble. To him, survival depended on respect and understanding, not hatred. Still, caution was necessary. He kept his rifle close, not because he wanted trouble, but because he knew the world was unpredictable. Life on the frontier taught him that peace and danger could exist side by side. One careless moment could change everything. Despite the hardships, he found peace in routine. Feeding the horses, checking the cattle, fixing tools, these simple tasks gave his life meaning. Each day completed was a small victory. He measured success not by wealth but by endurance. As long as he could stand at the end of the day, he considered himself fortunate. Sometimes, when the work slowed, memories returned. He remembered his younger years, when dreams were larger and hopes came easier. Back then, he believed he might build more than just a ranch. He imagined a home filled with warmth and shared laughter. But time passed, choices were made, and life led him here instead. The frontier did not allow regret to grow. Every moment demanded attention. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with soft colors, the rancher stood quietly and watched the land. He felt a deep connection to it, as if it understood him better than people ever had. The silence around him was not empty, it was heavy with meaning. He often wondered what the future held. Would he grow old alone on this land? Would the ranch survive the changing world? These questions had no answers, and he learned to live with that uncertainty. Hope, he believed, was not about knowing what would happen, but about continuing forward despite not knowing. The night brought cold air and clear stars. He lay down on his bed, tired but alert, listening to the sounds outside. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the wind brushed against the walls. Sleep came slowly, as it always did. Life had trained him to rest lightly. As his eyes finally closed, he had no idea that his life stood at the edge of change. He did not know that the courage he carried quietly within him would soon be tested in ways he never expected. For now, he was just a man resting after another hard day, unaware that the path ahead would lead him towards something far greater than land or survival. In that quiet moment before sleep fully claimed him, the rancher felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes before a storm or before a turning point. He breathed deeply, trusting the land, trusting his instincts, and trusting that whatever came next, he would face it with the same strength that had carried him this far. The next morning began like any other, but something in the air felt different. The rancher woke before dawn as he always did, yet his sleep had been lighter than usual. He stepped outside, letting the cool air touch his face, and looked across the land. The sky was pale, slowly changing color as the sun prepared to rise. He did not know why, but his instincts told him to stay alert. After tending to his animals, he rode out to check the far edge of his land. This part of the ranch was quiet and rarely visited. The grass was taller here, and the ground uneven. As he moved forward, his horse suddenly slowed, sensing something unusual. The rancher noticed marks on the ground, fresh footprints, not made by animals. He studied them carefully, his expression calm but focused. He followed the signs slowly, making sure not to rush. Years on the frontier had taught him that patience often meant the difference between safety and danger. The trail led him toward a dry creek bed, hidden behind low hills. As he approached, he heard faint sounds, soft voices, strained and tired. He stopped and listened. His hand rested near his rifle, but he did not raise it. Instead, he moved closer, carefully and quietly. What he saw made him pause. A small group of Apache people were gathered near the creek. They looked exhausted, and one of them appeared injured. Their clothes were dusty, their movements slow. They were not hiding, but they were clearly struggling. Fear crossed his mind for a brief moment, but it did not take control. He remembered all the stories people told, stories filled with anger and mistrust. But what he saw in front of him did not match those tales. These were people in need, not enemies preparing for harm. He made a decision that could not be undone. Slowly, he stepped into view, keeping his hands open and away from his weapon. The group noticed him at once. Tension filled the air. Some stood protectively in front of the injured person, while others watched him closely. The rancher spoke calmly, using simple words, even though he knew they might not understand him fully. His tone mattered more than the language. He pointed to the injured person, then to his ranch, offering help through gestures. Silence followed. Seconds felt long, heavy with uncertainty. One woman stood slightly apart from the others. She watched him closely, her eyes sharp and thoughtful. There was strength in her posture, even though she too looked tired. She spoke quietly to the others in her language. After a moment, the group relaxed just a little. It was not full trust, but it was enough. The rancher led them slowly back toward his land. He did not rush them, and he kept his movement steady. When they reached his ranch, he brought out water and simple food. He watched carefully as they accepted his help, still cautious but grateful. He cleaned the injured person's wounds as best as he could. He was not a trained healer, but he did what he knew. The group stayed nearby, watching every move. The woman who had spoken earlier remained close, her presence calm but protective. Days passed, and the Apache group rested on the edge of his land. The rancher respected their space. He did not ask questions or push for conversation. Instead, he let actions speak for him. He brought water, shared food, and offered shelter from harsh weather. Trust grew slowly, like a seed breaking through hard ground. Small gestures mattered. A nod of thanks, a shared moment of silence, a quiet understanding that danger did not always come with unfamiliar faces. The woman continued to observe him. She noticed how he treated his animals gently, how he worked without complaint, and how he never showed anger. She saw a man shaped by hardship, not cruelty. In return, the rancher noticed her strength and quiet grace. She carried herself with dignity, even in difficult conditions. Communication remained limited, but meaning passed between them through simple signs and expressions. He showed her the land, pointing out where water flowed during rain and where shelter could be found. She listened carefully, learning his world as he slowly learned hers. One evening, as the sun lowered and shadows stretched across the land, the woman approached him. She spoke softly in broken words he barely understood, but her message was clear. She thanked him, not just for the help, but for the respect he showed. That moment stayed with him. He realized then that courage was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was choosing kindness when fear would have been easier. The frontier had taught him how to fight, but this experience taught him something deeper, how to stand firm without raising a hand. As night fell, the group prepared to move on. The injured person had regained strength, and their journey needed to continue. The rancher felt a quiet sadness he did not expect. Their presence had brought life and purpose to his days. The woman paused before leaving. She looked back at the ranch, then at him. There was a silent understanding between them, something unfinished. Without many words, she made it clear that paths sometimes crossed again, even when the land seemed endless. When the group finally disappeared into the distance, the rancher stood alone once more. But the loneliness felt different now. It was lighter, filled with memory and meaning. He returned to his work, yet his thoughts often wandered to the quiet strength of the woman and the trust they had built. He did not know it yet, but his choice that day had already changed the course of his life. The frontier was still dangerous, the land still unforgiving, but something within him had shifted. He had learned that respect could build bridges where fear only created walls. As he lay down that night, looking up at the stars, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than before. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. His heart was no longer closed to the unexpected paths life might place before him. Time moved forward, but the rancher felt as though something had been left behind with the passing days. After the Apache group departed, the land returned to its quiet rhythm, yet it no longer felt the same. His routine continued, feeding animals, repairing fences, riding across the plains, but his thoughts often drifted to the woman who had watched him with such careful eyes. He did not speak her name because he did not know it, but her presence stayed with him like a memory carved into stone. Weeks passed. The seasons began to shift, and the air carried signs of change. The rancher worked harder than usual, preparing for uncertain weather. Still, there were moments when he would pause, scanning the horizon, wondering if their paths would cross again. He told himself not to expect anything. Life on the frontier had taught him not to rely on hope, yet hope found him anyway. One afternoon, as clouds gathered and the wind moved differently across the land, he noticed movement near the far ridge. His heart quickened, though he kept his expression calm. He rode slowly toward the shape, careful not to appear threatening. As he drew closer, he recognized the familiar figures. The Apache group had returned, fewer in number this time and walking with purpose rather than need. Relief passed through him, followed by caution. He stopped at a distance and waited. The woman stepped forward first. Her posture was steady, confident. She raised her hand slightly, a gesture he remembered from before. He responded in the same way. There were no sudden movements, no raised voices, just two people acknowledging each other across open land. This time they did not come as strangers. The trust built before had not faded. The rancher welcomed them again, offering water and rest. The group explained, through signs and broken words, that they were seeking a place to pause, not because of injury, but because of choice. They remembered his kindness and had returned to a place that felt safe. Days turned into weeks. The Apache group stayed nearby, setting camp at a respectful distance. Life settled into a shared rhythm. The rancher continued his work and the group lived by their customs, yet their worlds slowly touched. They shared fire, food, and silence. Words were few, but understanding grew. The woman spent more time near the ranch. She helped with simple tasks, learning how he worked the land. He showed her how to care for the animals, and she taught him different ways to read the sky and the earth. Each lesson was given patiently, without pride. Their bond formed not through grand gestures, but through quiet cooperation. He learned that her strength came not from force, but from calm resolve. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, her words were thoughtful. She carried the weight of responsibility with grace, always aware of her people, her past, and her future. In return, she saw the rancher more clearly. He was not just a man of routine and hard labor. Beneath his quiet nature was a deep sense of care. He never acted in anger, never raised his voice without reason. He respected boundaries, whether spoken or unspoken. To her, this showed true character. There were challenges. Cultural differences created moments of confusion. Simple actions could be misunderstood. But instead of turning these moments into conflict, they treated them as chances to learn. A mistake became a lesson, not an offense. Respect remained the foundation of everything they shared. As time passed, the connection between them deepened. It was not rushed. Neither tried to change the other. They accepted who they were, shaped by different worlds, yet guided by similar values: honor, resilience, and care for life. The rancher felt something shift within himself. The loneliness that once weighed heavily on him began to lift. He still valued solitude, but now it felt chosen, not forced. He found comfort in shared silence, in knowing someone understood him without needing many words. The woman faced her own struggle. Staying near the ranch meant standing between two worlds. Some from her group questioned the closeness. Others watched carefully, unsure of what the future held. She listened to every concern, never dismissing them. Her strength lay in balance, honoring her people while following her own truth. One evening, as the sky darkened and the stars slowly appeared, the two sat near the fire. The land was quiet, and the air carried a sense of calm. She spoke to him then, using words he could understand more clearly now. She told him about her life, her responsibilities, and the path that had brought her here. He listened without interruption, knowing how rare such openness was. When she finished, he shared his story in return. He spoke of loss, of choosing this land, of building a life with his own hands. He admitted that he never expected companionship to find him here. His voice remained steady, but his words carried weight. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. It was not a promise, not a decision, but an understanding. Whatever came next would be faced together, with honesty and patience. The days that followed were filled with quiet certainty. They worked side by side, learning each other's rhythms. Trust had grown into something deeper, mutual respect strengthened by shared experience. The land itself seemed to accept their bond, offering calm skies and steady ground. Eventually, the Apache group prepared to move once more. This time, the decision felt heavier. The woman stood at a crossroads, both real and symbolic. She spoke with her people, weighed her responsibilities, and listened to her heart. No one rushed her. They understood that some choices shaped a lifetime. The rancher waited without pressure. He knew that true respect meant allowing freedom. He did not ask her to stay, nor did he assume she would leave. He trusted her judgment just as she trusted his patience. As the sun rose on the day of departure, the woman made her choice. She stepped forward, her expression calm but determined. Her path, for now, would remain near the ranch, not as a break from her past, but as a step toward a future she believed in. The rancher accepted this with humility. He understood that this was not an ending, but a beginning, one that required care, understanding, and time. Together, they faced the open land, aware that challenges still lay ahead, but confident that trust had already built a strong foundation. The frontier had once been a place of survival alone. Now, it had become a place of shared purpose. And though neither spoke it aloud, Both knew that life had quietly changed in a way neither could have imagined before. Life near the ranch slowly changed as the days went on. What had once been a place of quiet routine became a space where two worlds met. The rancher and the woman moved carefully, aware that every step they took together would be watched by others, both near and far. They understood that trust built between two people was one thing, but trust from the world around them was something else entirely. The rancher noticed the change first when visitors from nearby settlements stopped by less often. When they did come, their words were polite, but their eyes asked questions they did not speak. Some offered help with forced smiles, while others stayed distant, unsure of how to behave. The rancher accepted this without anger. He had lived long enough to know that fear often hides behind silence. The woman felt the weight of judgment as well, though she carried it differently. Members of her own people visited from time to time, checking on her, trying to understand her choice. Some accepted it with calm respect. Others struggled, worried that closeness to the rancher would slowly pull her away from her roots. She listened to them all, never raising her voice, never dismissing their concerns. She reminded them that honoring the past did not mean refusing the future. Daily life continued despite these tensions. The rancher taught her how to manage the land through changing weather. She showed him how to prepare for storms by reading signs in the sky he had never noticed before. When work became heavy, they shared it. When mistakes happened, they learned together. Their cooperation grew stronger because it was built on patience. Challenges came quietly at first. A fence was broken one night, likely by someone testing boundaries. Tools went missing, then later returned. Nothing was said, but the message was clear. Not everyone approved of the life they were building. The rancher chose not to confront anyone directly. He believed that strong actions spoken calmly carried more weight than anger. The woman admired this choice. She knew conflict well, and she also knew when it led nowhere. Instead of focusing on fear, she encouraged him to strengthen what they had. Together, they repaired what was damaged, improved what was weak, and stayed focused on the life they were shaping day by day. The land itself tested them too. One season brought harsh weather stronger than expected. Crops struggled, animals became restless, and the wind seemed endless. There were nights when sleep was scarce, when worry pressed heavily on both of them. Yet even in exhaustion, they did not turn against each other. They spoke openly, shared concerns, and found solutions as a team. During this time, their bond deepened in quiet ways. They learned how the other faced pressure. The rancher saw how steady the woman remained even when others doubted her. She saw how he carried responsibility without complaint. Respect grew stronger because it was tested, not sheltered. There were moments of doubt. Late at night, when the world was silent, each wondered if the cost was too high. Would the land ever fully accept them? Would people stop seeing difference before seeing character? These questions did not weaken them. Instead, they reminded them why honesty and patience mattered. One evening, after a long day of difficult work, the rancher finally spoke of his fears. He did not hide them or soften them. He admitted that he worried about putting her in a difficult position, about drawing unwanted attention, about failing to protect what mattered. His voice was steady, but his words were heavy. She listened carefully, then responded with calm clarity. She told him that choice always carried risk, but living without choice carried regret. She reminded him that strength did not mean avoiding hardship, but standing through it without losing oneself. Her words settled his fears, not because they promised ease, but because they promised honesty. As time passed, small signs of acceptance began to appear. A neighbor offered help without hesitation. Another stopped by simply to talk. These moments were not dramatic, but they mattered. Trust does not return all at once. It grows slowly, often unnoticed, until one day it feels real. From her people, acceptance came in layers. Elders visited and observed quietly. They watched how the rancher treated the land, how he treated her, how he listened more than he spoke. Over time, their concerns softened. They did not all agree, but they respected the care shown on both sides. The ranch became a place of balance. Traditions were honored, routines adjusted, and new habits formed. There was no attempt to erase differences. Instead, differences were acknowledged and respected. This honesty prevented resentment and built stability. One day, a serious challenge arrived without warning. A dispute over land boundaries threatened peace. Voices were raised elsewhere, and tension spread quickly. The rancher found himself standing between fear and fairness. He chose dialogue over force, patience over reaction. The woman stood beside him, calm and firm, reminding others that understanding was still possible. Their approach did not solve everything immediately, but it stopped the situation from growing worse. People noticed. Strength, they learned, could exist without conflict. Leadership could be quiet. Courage could be patient. That night, as they sat together under the open sky, both felt the weight of what they had faced. They also felt pride, not in victory, but in integrity. They had not compromised who they were. They had chosen respect again and again. The frontier remained uncertain. Life did not suddenly become easy, but something important had shifted. The ranch was no longer just a place of survival. It had become a place where understanding was practiced daily. As the stars filled the sky, the rancher realized that the true test of bravery was not facing danger alone, but standing beside someone through doubt and judgment. The woman knew the same truth, that belonging was not given freely, but earned through consistency and care. Together they rested, aware that challenges still waited ahead. But they also knew this. Whatever came next, they would meet it with patience, honesty, and the quiet strength they had already proven. And in that shared understanding, the future felt possible. The morning that changed everything arrived without noise or warning. The rancher woke before sunrise as he always had, but this time his rest felt deeper, calmer. For the first time in many years, he did not wake with worry sitting heavy on his chest. The land outside was quiet, not empty, but peaceful. The sky slowly brightened, and the cool air carried the promise of a steady day. He stepped outside and paused. The ranch no longer felt like a place he had to defend alone. It felt lived in, cared for, and shared. Small signs of change were everywhere, extra tools neatly arranged, supplies organized with care, and paths worn smooth by more than one pair of footsteps. These changes were simple yet meaningful. The woman was already awake. She stood near the fire, preparing the morning in a way that blended both their worlds. She moved with calm purpose, grounded and confident. When she noticed him, she offered a quiet smile. It was not dramatic or loud, but it carried warmth and certainty. They shared the morning without many words. Over time, they had learned that silence between them was not empty. It was full of understanding. Each knew what the other carried inside. The hardships, the choices, and the strength it took to keep moving forward. As the sun rose higher, people from nearby lands arrived slowly, one by one. Some came out of curiosity, others out of respect. No announcement had been made, but word traveled naturally, carried by observation rather than rumor. What they saw was not conflict or division, but balance. The rancher stood calmly, greeting each person with the same honesty he always had. He did not explain his life or defend his choices. He simply lived them. The woman stood beside him, not behind him, not ahead of him. Equal, steady. Elders from her people came as well. They watched closely, not to judge but to understand. They saw how the land was cared for, how animals were treated, and how respect guided every action. They listened more than they spoke. There was no grand ceremony, no loud declaration. Acceptance did not arrive in a single moment. It came quietly, through nods, shared meals, and calm conversation. It came through time. As the day moved on, the rancher felt something settle within him. The long years of standing alone had shaped him, but they no longer defined him. He realized that strength was not proven by endurance alone, but by the courage to open one's life to change. Later that afternoon, when the visitors had gone and the land returned to its familiar stillness, the rancher and the woman walked together along the edge of the fields. The wind moved gently across the grass. The sky was wide and open, just as it had always been. She spoke softly, reflecting on the path that had led her here. She spoke of her people, her past, and the responsibility she still carried. She made it clear that she had not abandoned who she was. Instead, she had chosen to grow, to bridge worlds rather than be trapped between them. The rancher listened with respect. He shared his own thoughts, admitting that he once believed his life would end exactly as it had begun, alone, defined by work and survival. He confessed that he never expected fulfillment to come quietly, through patience and kindness rather than struggle. They stopped walking and stood together, looking across the land. Nothing had changed about the soil, the sky, or the work that waited ahead, yet everything felt different. Purpose had replaced routine. Connection had replaced isolation. As evening approached, they prepared the ranch together. The tasks were familiar, but the feeling behind them was new. There was laughter now, light and rare, but real. There was comfort in shared responsibility. That night, under a sky filled with stars, the rancher reflected on the idea of reward. For most of his life, he believed rewards were earned through force, risk, or survival. But standing there beside the woman who had chosen this life with him, he understood the truth. His reward was not sudden or magical. It was built slowly, through courage shown in quiet moments, through kindness offered when fear would have been easier, through respect that expected nothing in return. The woman, too, felt the weight of the moment. She had faced doubt from many sides, yet she stood firmly in her choice. What she had found was not loss but balance, not separation but connection. The ranch became a place others looked to, not as a symbol but as an example. It showed that understanding could exist where fear once ruled, that cooperation could replace division, that shared humanity mattered more than difference. Seasons passed, bringing change as they always had. Storms came and went. Work continued. Life remained demanding. But it was no longer lonely. Each morning, the rancher woke with purpose, not just to survive, but to build. Each night, he rested knowing he was not alone in carrying the weight of the land. The woman continued to honor her people and her past while shaping a future rooted in respect. She became a bridge, not a boundary. And so, the brave rancher's unexpected reward revealed itself fully, not in a single moment of surprise, but in every quiet morning he woke beside someone who understood him, in every shared challenge faced with calm strength, and in the deep knowledge that true reward comes when one chooses courage guided by humanity. The frontier remained wide and uncertain, but within that vast land, a life of meaning had taken root, and that was more than he had ever hoped for.